Well, good news, everybody. I woke up human. I wonder if my werewolf curse has been broken or if this is just a temporary situation. Well, we better film this video quick before I turn back into a werewolf, because talking as a werewolf can be a little difficult. Hello, this is Soundout here, and welcome back to Month of Monsters. Today we'll be talking about comic book werewolves. This is going to be an example from DC, an example from Marvel, and examples in between. In terms of actual comic book werewolves, there are quite a few, but not many with toys, which just kind of seems like a missed opportunity. If you're running DC or Marvel toy lines, why would you not want a werewolf in it? But today's subject matters are going to be what has toys, and starting off is the Legion of Superheroes member, Timberwolf. Timberwolf debuted in 1964 in Adventure Comics, created by Edmund Hamilton and John Forte. This was a character introduced to the Legion of Superheroes to kind of mix up the power set. He was in fact experimented upon by his father, and he was given wolf-like qualities. Sharp claws, heightened senses, agility, speed, all that cool stuff. Though he did look mostly human. He didn't have a full werewolf transformation until many years later. In fact, this character has had a long history. With the Legion of Superheroes being a superhero team in the future, the DC universe constantly changing and having time travel, the Legion has had multiple continuities. So sometimes Timberwolf is just kind of a normal dude with some sort of enhanced wolf-like abilities. Sometimes he's a full-on werewolf. Sometimes he's a full-on wolf. It's kind of amazing, really. The character goes through such a rapid transformation depending on who's writing him and depending on how the artist wants to portray him. Sometimes he's like a dude that just looks a little scruffy, and then sometimes he's a dude that definitely has wolf-like features. And I think that's what makes the character kind of interesting in the werewolf discussion. He's definitely supposed to be werewolf-inspired. He's sort of cursed with the abilities that his father put into him through genetic experimentation, so it's got a sci-fi twist to it. But in terms of werewolves at DC, pretty much none get better than Timberwolf. Now, in terms of the actual appearance of the character outside of comic books, he's only really shown up twice. The Justice League Unlimited episode Far From Home from 2006, he had a cameo appearance alongside the rest of the Legion, and then he was a prominent character in the Legion of Superheroes TV series from 2006 that also featured him in a more wolf-like appearance. He had a more mutated state. And then there was also several episodes involving him becoming more wolf-like, including one where he was on trial for murder. So really interesting character of a really interesting superhero team. But how many figures has he really had? There was a DC Direct one, and other than that, it was a DC Universe Classics Timberwolf released in a 12-pack exclusive to Matty Collector. So let's take a look at just the Timberwolf part of that multi-pack to see if he's still a good figure all these years later. So like I mentioned, Timberwolf was released in the Legion of Superheroes 12-pack exclusive to Matty Collector, but we're only focusing on him because the rest of them aren't relevant to the Month of Monsters. Looking at Timberwolf, he uses the quote-unquote young body for the DC Universe Classics line, which means he's kind of small, sort of teenagery. The head sculpt does a decent job of portraying kind of a Superboy in the Legion of Superheroes era version of Timberwolf. The whited out eyes is a bit weird because I don't remember that being a feature in this point in time, but it does give the figure a cool look. He does have the Legion flight ring molded to his hand, which is always nice to see. It's a detail that should be there, and it is. Articulation-wise, he's got a limited range in his neck, doesn't move much, shoulders that move 360, out. They have a bicep swivel, there's an elbow joint, there's a wrist swivel, there's an ab crunch that moves forward and back slightly, a waist that turns, hips that move out, hips that move forward, hips that move back a little bit, knee bend, thigh swivel, and an ankle pivot. Timberwolf is not a super posable figure. He's very limited, but that's just how the DC Universe Classics line ran back then. He could probably have more articulation and more detail on a more modern figure, but there hasn't been one. This is literally all he's got, and the DC Direct figure prior to him that's based on Silver Age look, not much better. So unfortunately, Timberwolf is really lacking in action figures. That's a problem for the Legion of Superheroes in general. Our second subject of the day is going to be Marvel's Wolfsbane. This is a character in the New Mutants who was created by Chris Claremont and Bob McLeod for the 1982 graphic novel, The New Mutants. She has appeared in many different teams, including the New Mutants, X-Force, X-Factor, Paragons, Excalibur, Hellions, and the X-Men. Rain Sinclair herself is a mutant who has a wolf-like transformation. She can become a humanoid wolf, much like a werewolf, or a full-on wolf. much like other werewolves. She's pretty cool, and I like her power set because she has kind of some control over the werewolf transformation. Now, the interesting part about her is she has appeared in the comics for many years, but has only appeared a handful of times outside of the comics. She was in one episode of X-Men the Animated Series in 1992 called Cold Comfort. She was a recurring character on X-Men Evolution in 2000. She had a cameo in Wolverine the X-Men in 2009. She had her live-action debut in the New Mutants film, played by Maisie Williams, which that movie didn't actually end up doing anything beyond just being a standalone movie, and I hope that Wolfsbane can enter something like the MCU in the future. Now, of course, being on multiple teams, there could be multiple action figures of Wolfsbane. However, there's only one, and this one was released as a swap part option for the Danny Moonstar figure released to Walgreens through Marvel Legends. So let's take a look at the one and only true werewolf that has appeared in Marvel Legends.
So the Marvel Legends Wolfsbane was alternate parts to the Danny Moonstar figure exclusive to Walgreens, which featured heads and hands for Karma and, of course, Wolfsbane. That being said, this does make for a nice New Mutants era Wolfsbane figure. I definitely think we could use better, more iconic costumes, especially like the X Factor version, but this serves the purpose well for this iteration of the character. Taking a look at the head sculpt, which of course is what makes her unique in this case, very nice head sculpt. I think it's got the right kind of color shade to the hair, the fangs, the overall facial structure. It turns out pretty good for a likeness of the character. I do like the hands included, as they do have talons on them, so they are definitely werewolf-like, and they do sort of fit the rest of the design. Unfortunately, that's the only two parts that look like werewolf bits. The rest is just a normal X-Men bodysuit. Articulation-wise, Rain has a ball-jointed neck that has a hinge and swivel forward, outward shoulders, 360 shoulders, elbow bend, left and right swivel, a inward and outward pivoting wrist, as well as a turning wrist. The upper torso has a ball joint that allows for some movement, hips that move out a little bit, forward and back, very limited, a thigh swivel, a double jointed knee, and then we have a boot that moves forward and back, left and right. So due to the restrictions of the hips, she can't crouch down a whole lot, which I would have liked to have seen for the character, but she can get in some vague werewolfy poses. So while not the perfect representation of Rain Sinclair, it's a decent enough Wolfsbane for the most part. I definitely think Hasbro could do some more with the character. She has multiple different looks, especially more of the animal looking versions of her, but this is a nice starting place. And I do like the concept of having one body mold for 3 different characters, though being a Walgreens exclusive, it made this figure harder to find. But that being said, having the 3 different characters on the same mold doesn't look too out of place since they share a costume. In the end, both of these comic book werewolf figures are a little bit lacking, and we really could do better in the comic book werewolf field, especially because Timberwolf and Wolfsbane have been around for decades. Why are these the best figures of either of them? Because honestly, we could do better with them.
So those aren't the only comic book werewolves we have, but Wolfsbane and Timberwolf are pretty much the only ones that have toys. I went looking and there just really isn't anything modern or just any modern equivalent that would work for these characters, which is kind of a shame. Other comic book werewolves that I do really like, and I'm glad exist, include the Amazing Wolfman for Image Comics that's in the Invincible universe, as well as DC's Warren Griffith, who was on the Creature Commandos, also a really cool werewolf that should get a figure. But more importantly, one might be getting a figure soon, and that would be Jack Russell, aka Werewolf by Night. A longtime Marvel Comics character, he recently made his MCU debut in the Werewolf by Night Disney Plus special, so maybe there will be more toys for Jack Russell in the future. But whatever flavor it is, werewolves are cool, werewolves in comic book superhero universes are cool, and that's what I wanted to highlight today. Now tomorrow we're going to be looking into sort of a different world, sort of an idea of nightmares, and I hope you'll join me, so stay tuned.